Hey everyone, sorry for the delay. Ran into a bit of traffic coming back from my haircut. Got a nice little haircut here. So anyway, today is the final stream on my crusade to improve Mockery's error messages. So if you're tuning in live, thanks for sticking with me. This one has been a bit of a slog. Not so much in that it's actually, I thought it would be harder than it is. It's actually not that hard. It's really more nuanced, right? It requires it's almost like UI development. Like I'm having to really think through what I want these error messages to say and how they appear and all the different code paths. So that's kind of where I am today. I started making this, I jumped into Mockery itself because again, I think in some of the last streams, the first stream we kind of figured out, is this possible? How hard is this going to be? Okay, not very hard. So the second stream we dug a little deeper and we said, okay, where are all these messages, all the different messages I want to change? And we kind of started hacking to see how hard it's going to be. Oh, I thought I said focus, but I did not. So let's say focus for 1 hour so we don't get a bunch of messages on lunch plans. Anyway, the second stream we kind of focused on all the different paths and trying to hack those out. And I was just doing all this in a vendor folder in the Shift project where I'm using Mockery to make it a little easier. But I feel like that started to get a bit off the rails. It was hard to start to keep track of all the different messages and stuff that we wanted. So today we are in Mockery itself. And now what I want to do is start driving out with tests all those different places. So I'm not necessarily going to try to change all the code. What I would really love to see is a test case that has all the different, a test case for all the different error messages that we're going to make a bit more human readable. So just to collapse these here for a second, basically we have these tests. So again, at a high level, at the end of the stream, I just want to be able to collapse this and see all the different bits. If some of them are failing, that's fine. I'll make them pass. But then I think this thing will be PR ready. So I've got a bit of a kind of feature or integration style test here where we're basically saying, hey, these are all the expectation messages that we would expect to appear. So in this case, we're saying, okay, test messaging for missing expectation, right? Test messaging for missing expectation with arguments. Test messaging for single expectation with unmatched arguments. So just building all these out. So I've got this passing. If we run this, those 3 tests with 6 assertions are passing. They're throwing the right error messages, they're throwing the right exception with the correctly set error message. So let's just kind of take a look at one of these. So what I've done is this bad method call, it says, hey, this stub received a call to, or this mock received a call to foo, which it did not expect. Did you mean to set an expectation for this method call, right? Again, human readable of what happened with a suggestion of what to do next instead of, Mockery _0 _ stub set unexpected, method call. Okay, again, I kind of understand what that means as a developer, but this just reads a little more human. Hey, it still has Mockery 0 _ stub received a call to foo, which it did not expect, right? Did you mean to, set an expectation for this method call? I think messaging is not perfect. But with this single test, with all its different cases, it's going to be very easy to tweak this in Mockery over time. I'm just trying to provide a solid foundation for all the different places. And now with this test, it's going to be so easy for anyone to go in here and tweak this stuff, right? So for example, I was thinking maybe these should have backticks to, demonstrate kind of a markdowny style code. Or, I know Laravel does something, where it, puts those in brackets, maybe. So, whatever makes this maybe more readable. Maybe someday they want to incorporate term wind, I don't know. The point is, with this test case, I think we're on the right track to really just define all these and make it so easy to go and change these expected messages. Whoops. So Let's keep going down the line. I've got these passing now, so when it's missing an expectation again, it receives a more human, readable message for those two. Okay, so the nuance here, if you remember from some of the previous streams, is that the real nuance of all this is as you start to get more and more expectations, right? What if you got more than one method call, but you had one stubbed but not the other kind of thing? So how can we set that up, right? So let's kind of do that. So let's say test messaging for multiple expectations with unmatched arguments, right? So now it's a scenario where maybe I say, Mockery should receive or expects. Let's really use expects here. Let's change that before we get too far. So expects, add with 1 and add with 2. And let's say that or this should just be null, I guess. That's interesting that it's true. Mockery add should just be true or null. Let's make sure all this still passes. Okay, the second one failed. That's good. That makes sense. So test messaging for method add for Mockery stub 0 should be called exactly 1 time, but called 0 times. Oh, if I add that kind of changes it. That does kind of change it, doesn't it? Does it do that? I see why they're using should receive now. Method add 1 from Mockery stub should be called exactly 1 time, but called 0 times. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'll come back to that. Let's put these back to null because they don't do anything. But let's put this back to should receive for now because I'm getting into this land where yeah, that's a higher level expectation, right? So we'll have to check that out. Okay, this is fine. This is test messaging for multiple expectations with unmatched arguments. So right now I've just set this to do, and it needs to obviously be, something more of what we expect. So I think this is kind of one of the really hairy ones. So let's try to drive this out for a second. What I want to do is demonstrate that, for example, if we say this if we say mock add 1, right? And then we do a -1 for the other one, or we say like -2, right? The multiple thing, it's getting to where we want to get, but this is kind of the really, really fancy one. What I want to do is kind of say that you did call it twice, right? And one of them matched, but the other one didn't. So ideally, this would be smart enough to say, received a call to method stubs add -2, which it did not expect. Mockery expected a call to, add 2. That would be really cool if it were smart enough to do this, right? Because it knows that it had 2 calls, it got 2 calls, but that second call didn't line up. So it's the same messaging for a single, but it's, that's not happening. So let's keep driving some of the rest of these for a second. So let's say something like test messaging for multiple expectations let's call this with matching and unmatched, right? And then here we could say test message for multiple expectations with all unmatched, right? So here, we never even call add 1. It's still just straight the -1, right? So here we could say something like Mockery received a call to, blah blah blah, which it did not expect. And then I think this is kind of the original code path, right? So let's just say this. Let's move this up again, because I think there's some nuance that could happen here. This is where it gets really, really nuanced. Okay, So the messaging for multiple expectations with all unmatched. So this is just a straightforward default, the old school message that should happen. So it's just Mockery received a call to add -1, which it did not expect, right? Okay, and there could be other messaging here. We could say something like, you know, Mockery add 1 has other expectations for 1 and 2 or something. We could get super fancy here, but I think the sky's kind of the limit there, and we have to kind of draw the line somewhere. We don't want to be so suggestive to say, like, you know, all these other things could have happened, right? That's the whole world could happen. There's an infinite possibility. So we really only want to make the suggestion if just one thing, the arguments, were unmatched. So that's the difference between these two test cases is what I'm trying to drive across here. This is the default messaging though. So let's get into expectation director. And our default no longer should be to do. It should be this, but without that secondary part. So it should just say Mockery received a call to that thing which it did not expect, period, and then the rest of the stuff. So this, one of these should end up passing, I would think. Oh, was the first one already passing? Did I not do that right? I would expect this one with all unmatched. I would expect this one to fail. It's interesting that that's passing. Test messaging for multiple expectations with, okay. Did I not set this up right? This one, let's just filter this one. I'm surprised this is passing. -- filter. See, this is the difference between should receive and expects. We're saying it expects to receive this, but it didn't. Yeah. That's where the messaging gets this is a nuance of mocking stuff. If we say it should receive, oh, it should receive, but it doesn't have to. That's the difference between should receive and expects. So in this case, you know, it's not failing because, oh, it should receive it, but it never really did. So this test is just flat out passing, which is kind of strange. Whereas this one did get a call, but it wasn't the call it expected. So it's, you know, it's driving it through because it got called, and so it's actually ending up checking them. It's kind of strange in my mind. It's almost like a bug in my mind that Mockery doesn't complain here that it got called with something else. The problem is if I change this to expects, I don't think we're going to trigger that same error message. Yeah, see, we're going to get should be called exactly 1 time. We're going to get an invalid count exception. I don't think that's what we want. I'm hearing some stuff in the chat. Let's see what's going on here. I've been doing something similar in recent tests using a string constant. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, should receive once is expects. It's just a shorthand. If you go down and look, yeah, see, should receive once. So it's really just a shorthand for that. So I like using expects. Again, it's more explicit, but also changes the behavior of the mock itself. It makes sure that ends up getting verified, if you will, at the end. Whereas should receive, it's kind of like, oh, it should receive it, but it doesn't have to. Which in my mind, that again, that's kind of a bug. That's a big breaking change. So I could see why that needs to just be separate. But the fact that I called it with something that it didn't expect, even if I said should receive, but it never, I don't know. I feel like that the fact that I did call it with something else is kind of strange, that it didn't end up complaining about that. That's a foot gun and a completely different thing to fix. So I'm trying to think how to set this test up so it ends up passing. The goal here is test messaging for multiple expectations with all unmatched. How can I get it? And maybe that's the thing, right? It never gets here. What's the setup where it gets to no matching expectation exception, you know, but it wasn't called. If all are unmatched and you call it expect, what if I change this to should receive? Do I still get the same? Yeah, I still get the same. That makes sense. But just playing around with this, if I did this, or sorry, mock add 1, so that one's, see, it just passes. It doesn't give a crap about that should receive. That's an interesting code path that I think is going to be a bit hard to figure out. Yeah. Why are these? These are getting checked because it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So what I have to do, I think, is what I'm doing here. I don't think this is a valid test path for the current state of Mockery. It's like a future test path, but it's not a current state test path. So I think this mark skipped. Yeah, Mockery does not enforce should receive and expects requires a call to be made. Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's say should receive. Actually, yeah, should receive does not require a call to be made. So this setup is impossible at this time. Yeah, that's not exactly true, but all right, I'll come back to that. We'll skip that for now. Let's focus back on this one. I think this one is legitimate where I call it, but I call it a second time with not the right thing. So this, if we get rid of our filter, I can see now why that one's passing and the other one's not. So we got a test skipped. That's fine. So now we see Mockery received a call to method stubs, which it did not expect. Contains Mockery received a call to blah, 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 which it did not expect. Mockery expected a call to stubs add 2. Okay, so ideally, this is our complicated path. Ideally, we could go ahead and say the other one that it expected. Now I'm not going to drive that out too much right now. Again, I don't want to get, I feel like I'm already getting off the rails because this is dense stuff. So let's keep going. We can say test messaging for expectation count. All right, so now we can get into this, right? And here we just don't call, how could you make this happen? You really do nothing else, right? I think this would end up throwing. Nope. We got to skip. Did I not set that right? Did this just pass? Shouldn't have passed. That should die with not getting called. Oh, it's so difficult. Why is so difficult? Let's filter this again. No, it fails. Oh, it's not the type. Sorry. That got lost. Let me get rid of this test skipped. It's creating too much noise right now. Let me just comment that out. There we go. Not the same one. It should be a different one. So let's, what is this? Invalid count? We saw that a minute ago. What was that? What type of message was that? Messaging, multiple, should not receive. Yeah, that's higher up than this. Here we go. Invalid count exception is what we want. Let's try this. Okay, so nope, it doesn't throw that. This is something that's checked at the very end. Do we need like the teardown stuff? Where else are they doing this in the test suite? I'm sure they have to have a test for this somewhere. Yeah, here we go. There we go. Mockery closed. That's what I thought. You have to, this is another nuance of Mockery. You have to kind of call this Mockery closed to make sure that that ends up, you know, asserting all of those things. I think it was doing it automatically in the other test, but again, this is something that, you know, might have to check. Here we go. Failed asserting that message contains, should be called exactly 1 times, called 0 times. Okay, so Mockery received a call. Okay, so of course those don't match. What is the new messaging that we would want for this, if any? It's not a bad message. Method add 1 from Mockery. I think the format of this new message is basically Mockery, you know, expected, or Mockery got X, but, you know, expected Y, you know, check W. That's basically, you know, kind of the format of these, right? So, or sorry, Mockery, you know, Mockery got X, but expected Y, check, you know, blank. So if we fill that in, we could tweak this just a bit where we say something like Mockery expected add 1 to be called 1 time, but it was called 0 times, right? There we go. So I think, again, just a little tweaking. So let's see if we can get this pass, right? Let's get a passing test. Okay, so a little closer. We don't need all those line breaks. That's just left over from the copied test. Let's see if we can get this passing real quick, and then we'll write a few more of these, and I think that's good enough today to see kind of the path that I'm on. And I'm gonna keep working on this off stream. I don't feel these have made for very good streams. There's a lot of nuance here. There's a lot of depth to it. I think everybody might like the idea of an improved message, but they probably don't care about seeing, you know, how the sausage is made, sort of speak. So let's go find everywhere this happens. It's really not a lot of places in the code. So I think, here we go. Method, blah, 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 should be called blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think we could clean this up. So we could say, get Mockery, get name. Ooh, because, interesting. Is this the only place new count is thrown? New invalid, or well, let's not do it that way. Let's go back and look at these. So we have use, we have throw, we have an exception equal. So at least, at most, and then exact. Okay, so at least is a small change in the wording. So I'll want to cover these. So again, some of this is figuring out which one. So I think right now we need to change exact. That's the one we care about. So here we could say something like Mockery get name should be called exactly blank, but called blank. It'd be nice again if this wording here, I wonder if we have like a helper. I wonder if we have a helper here where we could say like, you know, test this. Doesn't Mockery, I thought Mockery had like a fancier way to output the name. So string this expectation. So instead we're saying Mockery expected this expectation colon, that is kind of the format, to be called, not should be called, to be called exactly 1 times, and then what do we say? But it was called, comma, but it was called 0 times. So, comma, but it was called, oh, sorry, times. All right, we'll clean up the plural, but this should get us really close, I think. Okay, so Mockery expected add, oh, it's backwards. Okay, my bad. So this is just backwards. Boop, boop. I thought expectation had like a format. Nope. All right, whatever. We'll leave that alone. Do you need even string here? Or does it gripe? I guess we'll say string. They're casting it, why not? Okay, so mockery expected, blah, 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 colon, colon, add 1, okay, to be called exactly 1 times, but it was called 0 times. Mockery expected, same thing, to be called 1 time, okay, so again, now we're getting into the pluralization of stuff, but it was called 0 times, Awesome. Very close, we just need the pluralization now. We can do that in place, not awesome, but let's just do this in place. So if it's equal to 1, is this considered an int? It's not cast to an int, or do they check this? They do check this as an int, so I think we'll carry on with that. So let's say if it's 1, then it's time, right? Otherwise, it's times. So basically reinventing Laravel's plural, string plural helper, and we actually still need to output this. I think I'll probably make a helper for this within Mockery, but I think this gets us on the right track. Okay, I would have expected this to pass, so how do we mess up? Mockery expected Mockery stubs to be called exact, oh, need a space. Need a little space there. All right. Okay, so we have Mockery expected to be called exactly 1 time, but it was called 0 times. Mockery expected, okay, exactly. We're missing exactly here. And then we'll have to figure out how to trigger that because case. To be called exactly. All right, this should pass. Nope, just kidding. Let's just put these side by side. See, this is the nuance and why I don't think this makes for the greatest of streams. Let's bring that across. Let's bring this across and see what I'm missing. It's probably just a simple space or whatnot. Okay, boom, 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 boom. But it was called 0 times. Those look perfect. What am I missing? Do I have a space somewhere where I'm not supposed to have a space? I probably have a space where I'm not supposed to have a space. It's quoted here. What am I missing? To be called exactly 1 time. This is strange. What am I missing here? I don't know. Is this the right one that's failing? Yeah. Test messaging for expectation count. Mockery expects, Mockery stub. Oh, there's a line break. It's a forced line break here. What is that about? Ew. Ew. That's gross. I thought that line break was my terminal. That's actually Mockery. See, we could get this better messaging, man. Come on. Okay, now I just need some spacing. All right, cool. This should pass. This should pass. Fingers crossed. Yes. Woo. That should pass. All right, cool. Okay. I think what we're going to do, what's because? Get exception message because. Need to figure out how that because is triggered. But again, that's nice if it works because it gives us this like, again, this Mockery, you know, got X, but expected Y, you know, check W, right? So that because is perfect. It fit, and you know, it's nice. If it's Mockery, their exception messages aren't too far off. They're a little too technical, this whole Mockery bit. And this is going to be an easy fix because what I was getting at, and I think where I'm going to end the stream, is if we look at Mockery, they have these format methods in here already where they get like format objects, format. I think they even have like a format name in here, get name. But the point is that I think there's methods inside of Mockery that exist already. They just need to be refined to be a bit more human readable. All the messaging's here. It's just could be a bit more human readable, right? So I think that's where we're kind of going to probably end things today. But yeah, so this is the name of the game for me. I've got the test. I'm actually in the Mockery, you know, library now in the code base. I can make a PR once I feel like this is ready. It's really just more a matter of what are all the places, where do all these things get hit? And it's basically, for me, just going in and seeing all of their exceptions. We know that these exceptions are what get thrown. So I'm effectively just going to open one of these up, hit Command, B inside of that, remove the test, so it's project files only, like, exclude tests or whatever, once I get that correct. But the point here is that these things are only called in like 2 places, right? So just see where they're called and make sure that message gets adjusted. So that's really what I'm doing, is just going down each one of these and writing a test that's set up for all those different paths. And I think once I get the test set up, correct, maybe these things were just missing Mockery close up here, and that's why, these weren't working the way I thought. But just every single test case, every single message, if nothing else, having this test alone, even if they didn't want the new messaging, I could just go put the old messaging back here, but it gives you a much better foothold for someone in the future to more easily come in here and make a PR and be able to tell all the different messaging. I think honestly I think that's where Mockery is a little bit unwieldy, as we've seen in these streams. You really, really have to get in here, and there's so many different little places where this messaging happens that it's kind of tough to approach, right? And it's intimidating anyway, because it's like this mocking testing framework, that requires some knowledge of the terminology and so forth. So I think this test case will make it more approachable to come in here and make these more human readable. So again, I'm probably not going to change this naming right now to be, ideally, this would just say something like, set add. Again, total human readable there, not the Mockery stuff. But that's a 1-line change in the future once this PR is merged. So that's the point. I'm going to spend a lot more time off stream getting this test case, just touching every exception message that's thrown inside of the Mockery library. And from there, it's going to be very easy then to just test drive these changes, because all it is, as we've seen here, it's just a bunch of string manipulation, right? Just at least instead of whatever, making a little helper to do pluralization. Just little tweaks that I think make those error messages better. So anyway, thanks for those who joined live or are watching this in the future. I appreciate not my best topic or stream, but this is something that has bothered me for years. And I just kind of accepted it and learned to read these messages, much like you read the composer output when it's like, there's 7 problems and this thing's incompatible version, whatever. It's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming error message. You just kind of immediately abandon the message because it's kind of unhelpful, because it's so noisy. You just end up going back to your code and seeing why it failed visually. But I think Mockery, again, is supposed to be able to help and guide you and say, it'd be great if it guided you, right? And it said, you set up this thing, but it got this thing instead. Like, that's so much more helpful than just like, unexpected method call, Mockery _0. Like, I can be better at testing with these messages, and that's the goal. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining live again. I will see you all next time.